Okay, so we're going to wrap it up tonight talking about the gift of fearlessness, Abhayadana. So right off the top, I want to call attention to words again so that we take care not to take them too literally the way, they're actually defined in English. And what I'll suggest is, by fearlessness, we don't mean the literal absence of fear, but the freedom from having fear dictate anything. So fearlessness, what looks like fearlessness, can be seeing through fear. The Advaita teachers in particular, Nisargadatta and Ramana Maharshi, a couple of modern Indian mystics, are well known for their metaphors about how they see things, like their students would put them up on a pedestal and think they were very magical and, how do you see the world? What's the world like to you? Very common to this day for many people, wanting to believe that some special person actually sees the world completely differently. But, what they would say is like, well, I see it just the same as you. I just don't believe it the same as you. And so they would describe it as like a mirage. Like if you, see a mirage and at some point you might think it's water, but once you realize it's a mirage, maybe by, I guess in the case of a mirage, if you get close enough, it does disappear. But another example they often use is the difference between a rope and a snake. Like at first glance, they might see a rope and think, oh my gosh, it's a snake. In fact, this happened to us with a stick the other day, didn't it, Joe? Saw a stick and thought it was a snake. But once you know it's a stick, it cannot be a snake again. So you see the world the same. Fear arises, but it does not distort your perception or cloud your judgment about what you need to do or not do. So it doesn't get in the way of skillful behavior. Suddenly I just felt like I just needed to get cut to the chase and then back up and say all the other stuff. So that's basically the whole talk. But I have more, So some models of the Dana Paramita have, different numbers, different types of Dana. So we talked about 3: material giving, Dharma giving, and this fearlessness giving. And, you may see, if you read or hear some other things, giving to social justice, giving protection. These can kind of fit in some of these different categories that we're already talking about. So I like this, 3 model. I feel like it encompasses everything. But just to touch on that there are, you can split up the pie in more pieces if you'd like to. That's basically what I'm saying there. But in the sutras, all the old writings about these ideas, this Abhayadana is universally laid out as the most important. So why might this be? Fearlessness. And just keep changing in your mind, not being controlled by fear, not being wrongly influenced by fear. So, luckily for me, everything I've read from every great teacher even agrees on this point. They're not even having to, be selective. They all come down to fear. Fear is the thing. Fear is at the root of everything. Fear leads to unskillful behaviors. It's what tips our, normal likes and dislikes into craving and aversion. It's what will prevent us, even as meditators, from going toward the very thing we want most to understand, the fear. It's really, fear is very tricky, isn't it? It's got way too much power in most people's lives. The best I can tell, it certainly did in mine. That it, for some reason, has this power to trick us into thinking that it needs to go away first before I do the thing that I'm afraid of, or that it's some kind of wise teacher, and that if I'm afraid, it must mean that I should not do the thing that I'm afraid of. And I'm not saying you always should do the thing you're afraid of. I'm just saying the correlation is not that strong. To be very skeptical of fear, more likely there's just all these patterns that different people have based on the culture they grew up in, the things that happened to you when you were growing up, things that have happened recently, things that you've read. When I was 5, I saw a movie about spiders. I have not been a friend to spiders ever since. But does it mean that they're bad? No. We should be skeptical of our fear. This is a tall order though, right? Don't wait. Because sometimes, how do you know then if you come up against something that's still confusing? We've all experienced this in the outside world. Outside of your seated practice, right? All the time. Maybe, I have so many examples myself, not going to a class, not spending enough time on a paper, not applying for something or trying to have a conversation or trying to go somewhere because I was afraid. Probably everybody has something like that, right? So getting through these things, you can mitigate this risk of not understanding, whether your fear means something. Trying to discern, is this valuable or not? Is it pointing me to something I need to look at? Usually it's pointing to something else altogether, which is just the pattern of having fear around these things. But that's where, having contact with people like the ones in this room is so important. I would say that For me, it's non-negotiable. Everyone else can decide for themselves. For me, it's non-negotiable that there must be people with whom I'm willing to be honest, talk about what I'm afraid of or whatever other issues are coming up, and be willing to hear their take on it. To trust that if I have fear, it's more likely that they can see more clearly than I do. Fear is distorting. So this noble company, a lot of teachers refer to this as noble company, other people who are practicing, trying to get to the truth. They encourage, these are the people that you need in your life, so that you can go to them and say, I'm afraid of this thing, what do you think that means? And trust, finding people that you can trust, that they're going to take that quite seriously and look at it with you and not say, oh, don't worry about it, but consider the thing that scares you, where your fear might come from, and then you're on your way to fearlessness. It happens really fast, and the growth is exponential because you have that experience of watching one of these fears just, become like the monsters in the closet when you open the closet door and show your kids it's okay. And then you get a taste for it, I want to do that again. And that not being controlled by fear. And then you start to lose confidence in it, oh, that's just my little, unpleasant companion who shows up sometimes, but is also a good teacher. So I will listen to it because it has something to teach. But it's not teaching what I should do right now. It's teaching me something else. So on this, fear is tough, right? It can be extremely painful. I know some of you well enough to know that you've had horrific fear. When it comes to something that might happen to a close family member, some of the most frightening things that can happen. And it's important that we don't that's why it's so important that we don't act like fearlessness means oh yeah, I haven't felt fear in 5 years, 10 years. It's not absence of fear, just as, the path does not result in one having fewer feelings. It generally results in feeling more, which, for many people who have an experience of being somewhat numb, that can sound promising, but for many people who have been tormented by feelings, that can sound horrifying. No, I don't want to feel more. I want to feel way calmer, way less. But everything, as we go along, things keep getting interpreted differently, just like we're talking about with fearlessness, looking at that as not fear not having undue influence, not absence of fear. And the feelings, the availability to the intensity of your own life does not become intolerable even as it becomes stronger, because your equanimity grows so much also. This clarity, they all go hand in hand, that these, highs and lows, none of them have undue influence. It's just information. It's just an experience. So it becomes more like, well, like these guys this morning when there was a sound on the window and they jumped up and freaked out and ran around, and then they were fine. So it's like fear still comes, but it's so much easier, I can't even put it on a scale. One thing that I know I've said to a few people is, like, it's remarkable to me to look back and see just, what a tremendous mess I made of my life when I was younger in almost every possible direction. And there wasn't really that much objective difficulty. Like, it was all in my mind. And for a long time now, I've been working on improving my mind. It's like, that was a great idea. And I think from the outside, to other people, my objective circumstances have been incredibly difficult. And so the thing I marvel at is how much easier it's been. It's been easier in the past several years to have one of my kids be suicidal and go through a second divorce and lose a parent who died prematurely because of someone who was really unclear. I just don't remember having any confusion about any of those things. It was so much easier than just being an 18 or 20-year-old with a place to live and food to eat and trying to go to my classes. Like, that was hard. Because it's all about getting to the root of the problem, getting clear, seeing through all of these things, seeing through fear, seeing through sleepiness, seeing through all of our experience as just, this is just what's happening right now. It doesn't have to mean anything. There is discernment. I was looking for something else. I didn't find it. I'll tell you tomorrow if I find it. But I found something else. This is one of the people I was just mentioning, Nisargadatta. He was an Indian mystic. This is kind of jumping ahead. I hope it's going to make sense. Because I was just talking about this discrimination between when what occurs to you, what's the difference between I'm just having something intense happen, I can feel pressure, I can feel anger, I can feel fear. But if I don't feel confused, then everything continues to seem to work out exactly as it needed to. Here's what Nisargadatta said about practicing this. He said, deliberate daily exercise in discrimination between the true and the false, and renunciation of the false, is meditation. There are many kinds of meditation to begin with, but they all merge finally into one. So discrimination between the true and the false, and renunciation of the false. That's what we're talking about here. So you might notice sometimes even in formal practice, like we all have great ideas sometimes, right? Or like surprising ideas, or a sudden sadness or a grief or a fear comes up. Maybe seated, maybe when you're out in the world. But you can notice then, if you take your time, turn toward it and notice, well, I'm having this thought, instead of just getting carried away with it, like, oh my God, there's a habit for most people of, there's a feeling and that's me and it's true and here we go. Instead of pausing and looking at this and saying, well, do I know that about that person? Am I in the future when this thing happens? Is that a real thing or is it a thought? And that's what he's talking about when he says, then discard the false. We don't know. What do I know? Sitting on the cushion. Here's Pepper. At some point having a feeling. And then now you're able to share fearlessness, Abhayadana, the gift of fearlessness. When you know where you are right now, even with your kids, full of fear, if you know at the same time that your feet are on the ground, that you've got your little Daisy or your Jack or whoever with you, then you're giving the gift of fearlessness because you're rooted into something real. When we try to act, don't show that you're afraid. That undercurrent of fear still comes through. That's how I'm guilty. I guess some other people are too. That's how I have taught self-doubt and fear, by not being trustworthy when I was younger, by not knowing my own feelings, by not admitting what was really going on. So you don't have to be free from fear to teach fearlessness. I know that even I can present like that at times because people have told me, like, oh, you seem to not have fear. But it's just because I just know that it's a rope and not a snake. All right, so I want to make sure we tie all these things together, how these are all related. We've talked a lot about attachment lessening, which is kind of an umbrella for craving and aversion, attachment. When it's unhealthy is a way of talking about wanting to hold on to or avoid things. And the unconsciousness that leads fear or attachment or anything else into going in an unhelpful direction. All of that is what lessens with practice, but intentional practice, knowing why you're practicing, talking to people so that it can go deeper and actually clarify. I mean, just speaking for Louie and me, but maybe others have this experience too. We've met many, many people who have decades of practice, and I can tell you that it's not a guarantee of clarity. There has to be this determination and earnestness and asking people what they think, people that you trust. Being afraid of that and doing it anyway, which, I told you my story about telling Ursula, I need support, don't be greedy. It's like, yeah, it can be rough what you get back, but wonderful. Without it, I would feel like I was wasting my time. But these things in and of themselves, I just want to be clear too that it's normal and healthy and human to like things, to not like things, to not know things. Just like fear remaining, these things remain. You don't become like a person who doesn't care. When the path is healthy, you reveal a person who cares more and skillfully with less attachment. I found something in this book that talks about that. This is a different Harada from the one I quoted the other day. I came across this one by accident too and realized, oh, that's relevant. This teacher says these cravings and aversions, they're the source of all our suffering. However, if there was no greed, we would not be able to practice. If there was no anger, we wouldn't have the determination and the enthusiasm. Without ignorance, we wouldn't be reflecting and contemplating. For these reasons, I would like you to understand that craving, aversion, and ignorance are also human nature. It's only when we're used by these things that we come to think of them as bad. So we can deepen this presence that I was talking about. When you start to get carried away in a fear or a thought, noticing where you actually are right now. Practice and noble company are your great friends to increasing fearlessness. And then these things like this Harada Roshi was talking about, this, the craving has such a beautiful manifestation in the form of spiritual longing for connection, longing for insight and truth. There's a healthy aversion to, when your aversion becomes an aversion to keeping secrets from absolutely everyone, an aversion to settling for comfort instead of going deeper. And then, boy, is ignorance, my friend. Maybe that's my favorite, because it's just so humbling to see every day, when I'm paying good attention several times a day, that I just don't know. Have an idea and then it's wrong. And it's like, I love it. It's like one of my favorite things. It feels amazing. It's like it, constantly relieving the pressure of having to be special, having to be different, having to be separate, having to be somebody. It's like, oh, I was wrong again. Fantastic. It's like, so we all have this ability, right? To be wrong. To just show up in the very seat you're in right now. Tell the truth. It's a practice of fearlessness. The most important Dhamma paramita. Maybe the easiest, but maybe you didn't know. I really thought about these guys this morning after they jumped up and ran around. I'll tell Brandy because she wasn't here. And we were all sitting here quietly and both the cats were on my lap. And then something hit the window and they both did the crazy cat jump. They both leapt up and ran around, and Izzy hid behind Anya's, and I saw her one eyeball for 10 minutes, tried to see what was going on, and nobody in here moved. Everybody was like, poof. And then in a few minutes, the cats calmed down. And then, I don't know, within 10 minutes they were snoozing again. But that would have been really different if we had all jumped up and run around. If we all jump up and run around, what do you think they do, right? Then they would be completely freaked out, hiding under the furniture. And even after we sat back down, they would be freaked out longer. And I bring that up because it's that's the opposite. That's what we do to people when we're overtaken by fear. Teaching fear instead of teaching fearlessness. The sitting on something did happen. Something happened, but then we were grounded. They got grounded. Yikes, paper, oh my gosh. So more about how to practice then. I hope one thing that's getting across is that we don't need to focus on, how we should be by now. That's super common and normal, and that's why it bears so much repeating. It's this isn't about, you need to be better. It's about pointing out that you have everything you need already. Being, whatever your technique is when you're practicing, if you're practicing open awareness, if you're practicing with your breath, if you're practicing visual experience, if you're present during formal practice, during your life, every now and then we could call it forget to be afraid, the fear won't be able to stick to you because you weren't able to be in the future. You might find yourself just handling something well because you forgot to be afraid of it. All of these little ways, like we were talking about with noble company, different ways, and then it grows and grows so quickly when you pay attention. You notice that happened. Then you know that that's real. Your experience immediately is that that's more real than all the fears that never panned out. they don't pan out like we think they're going to. There's always going to be some variation. So we can learn from everything off the cushion too. It's just the avoidance of putting our attention that teaches the lack of self-trust. So avoidance teaches fear. Avoidance of my own feelings. I love that now my middle child is the most communicative. When he sees that I'm like not at my best, he'll walk up and he'll be like, "Are you okay? You know, when my oldest child did that, I used to lie to her. I was doing the best I could. But I don't lie now." And these two younger ones, they're pretty confident. I think they have quite a bit of self-trust because I never tell them to doubt what they know. Well, I think I more or less said all of these things. I wanted to mention too this thing I saw that Dogen spoke of. Dogen was the founder of the Soto Zen school, a 13th century Zen master. And it's a nice reflection by him because it ties all these pieces together that we've been talking about with, we're sitting here practicing, we're developing clarity. You can see that in a very technical way by, paying attention to what's going on right now. It's very simple what I mean by clarity. It's nothing mysterious. It's just like if you are looking at me and you see me, that's clear. It's not, if you're not distracted by your fantasy about what you're going to do tomorrow, that would be unclear. So it's very simple when we're talking about clarity. And that gets honed in this practice as long as you're a little bit careful and you check in with people to make sure you're not deluding yourself. But this clarity, it's the same thing as freedom from attachment. It's the same thing because when you're clear, you have less confusion. If you're not confused, it can't seem reasonable to superglue yourself to something that you care about. It can't seem reasonable to avoid the thing you most want to break through. And that's why all of these things are one thing. So Dogen said we don't need to acquire something called generosity in the end. It's a practice because it's something we can understand right now. What's difficult to understand is freedom from attachment. And Dogen says this is what generosity really is. It's freedom from attachment looks like what we call generosity. So all of you have shown me great generosity this week. You come and listened, and this process has been really wonderful and beneficial for me. I hope that something that I've shared these evenings has benefited your practice, because that's my intention. And yet, I have gained so much by just doing my best to look into these facets of the Dana Paramita. And speaking of my own ignorance, it is just so funny that I continue to be surprised every single time, every single day. It's funny that I could be surprised that it has benefited me so much. So thank you.